the last video, we explored an explosion graph, which is literally a one-shot event. In this tutorial, I will show you how to make a graph for multi-shot weapons. So we have 4 layers for this graph. The first 2 layers are very similar to the explosion graph. We have a base punch layer and a muzzle aka explosion layer. Let's start with the base one. Most of the stuff here is very similar to the explosion punch graph, so I will repeat them again to avoid wasting your time. The setup I want to focus is highlighted here. This allows this graph to be used in both one-shot or multi-shot weapons. The logic is as follows. Firstly, we check if the spawn rate is greater than 0. If it is, then we simply repeat the trigger using the duration calculated from the spawn rate. Next, we need to check the number of shots. If it's 0, then the weapon can shoot infinitely. So, we just simply pass the trigger to the next stage through the trigger any node. If the number of shots is greater than 0, then we will use a counter node to count how many shots have been shot, and a compare node to know then to stop. If true is triggered, the graph can stop. So we set auto stop to true. Again, we use auto stop instead of triggering the stop input directly to avoid small audible pops. If false is triggered, we will trigger the force input. Either way, this input was added in the last update. This will trigger an impact inside the synthesizer regardless of the spawn rate. Originally, we used the spawn rate here directly, but we soon found out that due to rounding errors, the synthesizer will sometimes go out of sync with the trigger on the attack decay node. So, to make sure the triggers are always aligned, we added this input. Be aware that the spawn chance is still applied on the force trigger. Another new input added in the last update is this hard force reset. If your spawn rate is high, a new shot can be fired while the current one is still running. By setting this to true, we reset the force to 0 before firing a new one. And that's it for the base punch layer. The muzzle layer doesn't have anything new. It uses the same setup as our explosion graph, and the re-triggering logic is added. The gunshot whiz is just a combination of distance attenuation and the old bullet words. This graph has already been explained in our old tutorial. Okay, the click-clack graph is kind of new. This graph is for short duration, multiple click sounds. You can use it for things like small clicking mechanics, gun reloading, bone cracking, etc. You can use the reference viewer to see its usages. As you have known, we have a multi-impact node. It basically spawns multiple impact SFX synthesizer. It also uses pooling for optimization purposes. It's a very advanced node, but it's also very complicated to set up. You can't also quickly test different models because you need to build a multi-impact data file. So, we have no plan to make another multi-impact node for impact force synthesizers. Instead, we build it directly like this. Compared to a custom native node like this costs a bit more resources, but not too much. Though it's more flexible. It looks a bit complex, but it's actually just copy and paste 3 times, with different delay times and triggering chances. Max duration is the maximum delay time between the first and last impacts. Most of the stuff here is just randomization to make the effect totally random. Finally, the output is mixed together. By the way, mono is enough for clicking effects. You want these effects to be sharp and narrow. Okay, back to our main graph. Again, the setup here is to make sure we don't go over the allowed number of shots. For distance attenuation, we simply reduce the gain up to 1000 centimeters. Above that, this effect won't be played. Even at 0 distance, it only has a 30% chance to be played. This makes it very subtle. Always playing it on every shot will make it kind of annoying. And that's it for this graph. It's a very complicated one, but most of the principles have already been explained in previous tutorials. Okay, the next video will be released later than usual. We're focusing on a new, important feature for the plugin. This feature is about spatialization. We expect it to take at least a month for the first iteration. In 2 or 3 weeks, we will show you the progress through a new tutorial. I hope you find this video helpful, and I'll see you again on the next one.